When we think of geometry, we usually think about shapes. But this week we're going to start on talking about points, lines, and planes because all of these are really important to geometry. Let's look at our first vocabulary word, and it's line. And if you look, a line is a segment that goes on in each direction forever and ever. Just keeps going and going. There is no stop. If we were going to play Simon Says for that, we would stretch our arms out wide and we would have our hands out flat to show that it goes on forever and ever. That's our Simon Says action for line. Our next vocabulary word is point. And a point is an exact location in space. So for example, we see a point on lines all the time. Here's 0, 1, 2, and 3. Now the question is, where is the point on the number line? Well, the exact location is 2. The point is on 2. The Simon Says action for that would just be making a fist and holding it up. That would be an example of point. Our next vocabulary is line segment. And if you look at the word segment, that just means piece. A line segment is a line that starts at one point and ends at another point. It's just a piece of a line because we know a line goes on forever and ever. Here we just have a piece. Our Simon Says action would be we would hold our arms out straight, but then we would make a point with our fists. So here is Jack making a point with each fist, and he's showing you the Simon Says action for line segment. It's just a piece of a line. When two lines cross at one point, we call that intersecting lines. They can only cross at one point because they go straight in each direction, which means they'll never cross each other again, but we call these intersecting lines. It makes me think of a stoplight because that's at a traffic intersection where two streets meet. So I always think of intersecting lines like a traffic intersection. The action we have for intersecting lines is you take your arms and you make a cross in front of you. That way your arms are intersecting each other. They're crossing each other at one point. That's our Simon Says action for intersecting lines. Sometimes lines run side by side and they will never run into each other. When this happens, we call it parallel lines. They're side by side and they never run into each other. What this reminds me of is railroad tracks. Railroad tracks run side by side, but they never run into each other or else the train can't go. Our Simon Says action for that, you hold your arms straight up and down and they're parallel to each other. They'll never run into each other. I took some pictures from around my house to see what kind of lines there are. If you look at this is inside the shower. I see lines. Here are two lines that are parallel, but then when you cross these lines across, they're now intersecting, aren't they? So you could say that there's parallel lines, and then you could also say that there's intersecting lines. Here I found a picture of our tree house, and if you look, we have parallel lines. They run side by side, and they're never going to run into each other. That's an example of parallel lines. Here's the lattice outside the deck. If you look, we've got lines that run parallel to each other. But then if you go the other way, you've got lines that intersect at a point. So you have a good example of parallel lines, but then you have an example of lines that intersect. They're running into each other. Here's the play place again. And if you look here, I've got a line here and a line here, and they run into each other, so it's an intersecting line. But then I've got a line here and a line here. They're parallel to each other. So we've got intersecting lines and we've got parallel lines. Last of all, I have my front window. And if you look, I've got, let's make this a color we can see. I've got the two windows that run parallel to each other. They're never going to run into each other. Those are parallel lines. Keep an eye out today for parallel lines and intersecting lines. They're all over the place. Let's see if you can find some.